Yes, and so speaking of the independence of not just the judiciary, but I'd like you to clarify the FBI's independence from the DOJ apparatus. Can the FBI conduct an investigation independent from the Department of Justice? Or does the FBI have to disclose all its investigations to the DOJ? Does it have to get the Attorney General's consent?
Well, we work with the Department of Justice, whether that's Maine Justice or U.S. Attorney's offices, on all of our investigations. And so we work with them. And so in a legal sense, we're not independent of the Department of Justice. We are spiritually, culturally, pretty independent group, and that's the way you would want it. But yeah, we work with the Department of Justice on all of our investigations.
So if the Attorney General or senior officials at the Department of Justice opposes a specific investigation, can they halt that FBI investigation?
In theory, yes.
Has it happened?
Not in my experience, because it would be a big deal to tell the FBI to stop doing something that without an appropriate purpose. I mean, oftentimes they give us opinions that we don't see a case there, and so you ought to stop investing resources in it. But I'm talking about a situation where we were told to stop something for a political reason. That would be a very big deal. It's not happened in my experience.
Well, a number of us have called for an independent investigator or a special prosecutor to investigate the Russian efforts to undermine or to interfere with our elections, as well as the Trump team's relationships with these Russian efforts. And should the Department of Justice decide that there should be such an independent investigator or special prosecutor, and you already have an ongoing FBI investigation into these matters, and the Attorney General has already recused himself, so how would this proceed when you have the Department of Justice conducting or assigning an independent or special prosecutor, and then you're already doing an investigation? How would this work?
Our investigative team would just coordinate with a different set of prosecutors. It's as if a case was moved from one U.S. Attorney's office to another. The investigative team just starts working with a different set of assistant U.S. attorneys. You don't miss a...
So the two investigations could proceed, but you would talk to each other.
Right. It's one investigation, and the strength of the justice system at the federal level in the United States is the prosecutors and the agents work together on their investigations. And so the investigators would disengage from one prosecutor and hook up to another and just continue going.
So in the investigations that you're currently doing on the Russian interference and the Trump team's relationship, are you coordinating with any U.S. Attorney's office on those investigations?
Well, two sets of prosecutors, Maine Justice, the National Security Division, and the Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office.
So should the AG decide to go with a special prosecutor, then you would end your engagement with these other two entities and work with the DOJ?
Well, I could
special prosecutor.
Potentially, or it could be that in some circumstances an Attorney General appoints someone else to oversee it, and you keep the career level prosecutive team. And so to the prosecutors and the agents, there's no change except the boss is different.
If I could just ask one more follow-up question. So has this happened before where you're doing an investigation and the Attorney General appoints a special prosecutor to conduct the same investigation?
It happened to me when I was in what I thought was my last job ever in the government as Deputy Attorney General, and I appointed Patrick Fitzgerald, then the U.S. Attorney in Chicago, to oversee a very sensitive investigation involving allegations that Bush administration officials outed a CIA operative. And so what happened is the team of agents that had been working for up a chain that came to me was just moved over and worked up under Patrick Fitzgerald.
Okay, thank you. So it happens. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator. Last but far from least, Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To take the analogy that you began with, I think we're at the end of the dentist visit, or toward the end of it anyway, and fortunately there's no unlimited time that the last questioner can take.
My dentist sometimes asks questions too.
To pursue the line of questioning that Senator Hirono just finished, there is abundant precedent, is there not, for the appointment of a special prosecutor. In fact, there are regulations and guidelines for the appointment of a special prosecutor.
Yes.
And that has happened frequently in the history of the Department of Justice. You mentioned one in your experience. Also, then designee Attorney General Richardson appointed a special prosecutor, Archibald Cox, who then pursued the Watergate investigation, correct?
Yes, there's been many examples of it.
So this would not be a earth-shaking, seismic occurrence for a special prosecutor to be appointed. In fact, taking your record, which is one of dedication to the credibility and integrity of our criminal justice process and your families, I would think that at some point you might recommend that there be a special prosecutor. Would that be appropriate at some point?
It's possible. I know one of my predecessors did it. Louis Freeh did it with respect to a Clinton administration issue about Chinese interference in an election. So it's possible.
And I take your contention that you don't want to talk about your conversations with the current Deputy Attorney General, but my hope is that you will, in fact, argue forcefully and vigorously for the appointment of special prosecutor. I think that the circumstances here are exactly parallel to the situation where you appointed Patrick Fitzpatrick and others where routinely special prosecutors have been appointed. And I know that your recommendation may never be disclosed, but I would urge that you do so. Going back to the questions that you asked about your announcement initially that you were terminating the investigation of Hillary Clinton, you said that the matter was one of intense public interest, and therefore you were making additional